He's coming from Birmingham in the UK today, and it's Mark McGregor. Mark McGregor will be familiar to many regular attendees of our events. He has shared with us on enterprise architecture, process management, process mining, and today he turns his attention to customer experience. With over 25 years of experience across vendors, analyst firms, and end-user organizations, Mark always has interesting insights to share, and I always look forward to our discussions because he speaks from a practitioner view, not just from a purely theoretical standpoint. So Mark, always a pleasure to have you here with us. Looking forward to your presentation. Very much looking forward to our engagement later on with our global audience on our live Q&A as well.
Great, thanks, Jose. Absolute pleasure to be here with everyone. Thank you again for those kind words. And yeah, I'm very much looking forward to our discussions later on. And I'm sure we're gonna get some good stuff going on. And so interesting there that in the introduction, you highlighted that intersection between the people, process, and technology stuff. And just for the benefit of our audience, we have these great discussions, Jose and I, but we never see what the other one's going to be presenting until you guys are seeing it live. Always great fun, but that's exactly where I'm coming from, that intersection between people, process, and technology for today's sessions. Because across all of the sessions today, tomorrow, and Thursday, we're going to hear a lot, whether it's from vendors about great technology, where the technology is moving to, and this intelligent automation, hyper automation, low code, no code, your code, my code, Fred's code, everybody's code, RPA, and all of the automation technology. But all of the automation technology in the world isn't going to save us if we apply it to doing, let's not say the wrong things, but let's just not say the best things. So for today's session, I wanted to share a little bit about why we should be focusing on customer excellence if we want to deliver long-term value from those automation efforts. And here on the screen, you've got a book cover of a book that I wrote with Steve Towers. And it's pretty incredible.
Mark, the screen is not being shared just yet, so if you could just make sure that's coming through.
Okay, I will do it again. Thank you. There we go.
We're good to go.
Excellent. So my apologies and thanks for interjecting there, Jose. So yeah, so the screenshot that I've got here is a book that Thrive that Steve Towers and I wrote, and would you believe it was 15 years ago? How to Succeed in the Age of the Customer. And it's just so fascinating that here we are 15 years on, and yet still we have, let's say, whether it's the operational excellence groups, whether it's the technology groups, whether it's other groups within business, still questioning whether a customer-centric, customer-first strategy is the right one, still chasing what I think is some of the wrong things. So what do I mean by customer excellence? There we go. So I'm suggesting that customer excellence is your new North Star. Now, we've all seen people using bits of the quote from the, Alice in Wonderland, well, gee, which way should I go? Well, anywhere is going to take you somewhere. And you're going to get there if you walk long enough. But whether that's where you want to go, we don't really know. So when we're thinking about automation, are we really thinking about the destinations that we want to get to? The same goes not just with automation, but with operational excellence and everything else. So if we think about it, customer experience, OPEX, business process management, supply chain optimization, RPA, these are all going to take us somewhere. The challenge is within our organizations is that often they're each taking us somewhere different, because what's going on in the customer experience team is disconnected from what's going on in the OPEX team, which is not the same as the supply chain team, which is not the same as the guys doing RPA. So actually we're heading off in a whole bunch of different directions and then wondering why we're not really making a serious difference. So I'd like to suggest that by taking on the idea and the thought processes behind customer excellence, then actually you can help make sure that everyone is moving to a common destination, and that common destination should be your new North Star. So let me just share with you the working definition. And as you can see, or you may not have noticed there in the copyright note, this is some work that started 2 years ago. With some of you may have seen some of the presentations from another former Gartner analyst, Jim Siner, very good friend of mine. We've been friends for over 20 years. I'm working with him and the former CEO founder of Signavio, Gary Decker. This is something we started to pull some of that work, building on some of the stuff that came from that earlier book. So we see that customer excellence is a business practice aimed at leaders to implement and continuously improve all end-to-end business processes to deliver unparalleled customer experiences. Okay, it's underpinned by the concept of customer first. Yes, we know we need to be operationally efficient. Yes, we need to have compliant business operations. And to do these things and be effective, then customer excellence is going to draw upon a whole bunch of different things, from CX, from OPEX, from BPM, using a blend of those management concepts and software. So that's what we mean by customer excellence. And let's think about, why is it so important? Now, I can't tell what industries many of you are in, but just let's take a little look. If you were just a normal, everyday, big box bank, you're spending an absolute fortune on automation. But how many traditional banks are spoken of in the same light as the fintechs? How many of those banks are still seen as disruptors, as innovative, as creative, and the people that we go, wow, they are so good, they look after me so well? Very few, and almost nowhere, because much of that automation has been focused on effectiveness. We're focusing on reducing pain for our organization. So if we think about it, we're chasing all of this automation to be highly effective, highly efficient, but we're not looking at it effectively from the customer's point of view. So we're simply going to move from dying slowly to dying quickly. From dying quickly to dying slowly. We're still actually going to die as a bank, or as an insurance company, or as a manufacturing company, or indeed as a retailer. Just reducing the costs of big box retail and running a retail store is not going to enable me to go and compete with innovation. Actually, I need to focus on being effective, and this means focusing on customer outcomes, focusing on people on the outside as to what they want to be effective, and then looking at saying, how do I deliver those experiences efficiently? And then I can not only survive, I can thrive. So it's that combination. So the focus, interestingly, on effectiveness means that at the worst case we survive, the best case we thrive. If all we're doing is focusing these automation efforts around efficiency, then all we're doing is changing the speed at which our organization is likely to go out of business. So we can look at this through a slightly different lens, and some of you may have seen me using this slide before. And ask yourself, okay, are you just doing things? Are you doing the right things? Or are you doing things right? So you might say that automation is helping me go from doing things which were inefficient, maybe manual, maybe using other systems, and I can make them much better. But it's only doing things right. A real worry that I have for many of you is when you look at combining things like the task mining with things like automation, you're just able to do the wrong things faster than ever before. There was nothing there in terms of, whoa, hang on, let's analyze, is the current process or the current system delivering the outcomes that customers want? Because if it's not, then no amount of automation is going to fix that, right? And in fact, if anything, you can institutionalize it such that it becomes harder to see and fix. Now, you might be saying, well, that's okay, but our objective is to lower cost. And if we want to lower cost, then these things are going to do it. And I totally agree. But one of the things about taking that customer excellence perspective is you can achieve what Jim many years ago called the triple crown. Because when you look at it through the lens of the customer and you deliver better and consistent experiences for the customer, you will find that as a result of the increased customer satisfaction, you're likely to increase revenues. And the funny thing is, you will lower the costs. So by looking at it through the lens of the customer, you can still get the cost reductions that you're looking for, but also you're going to increase revenues, increase customer satisfaction. And we all know that satisfied customers keep spending, tend to spend more, and tell other people. So there's a whole bunch of things that go on there. I have to say, and I'm not saying that the stories are not out there, but when it comes to intelligent automation and the application of these technologies, I don't see too many cases where someone says, boy, you should go and buy with company X because, whoa, those guys are amazing. I had such great experiences, and it's all because they put in this obscure automation and it's made my life so much easier. I can't speak for you guys as an audience, but what I see is in many cases where people have taken these types of approaches, actually what they've done, and if I think about it in the utility sector and to a certain extent in the banking sector, it seems that actually it's just pushing the work outside of the organization and onto the customer. And as an example of automation not cutting it, I'll give you an example of an airline. So flight goes mechanical, system's really clever, understands where the passengers are going to go, and it automatically reroutes the passengers, puts them on different planes. Fantastic idea. Except if you're trying to get from Berlin to Birmingham, then simply booking you on the next flight to Zurich and then having your second flight from Zurich leaving 36 hours later without any regard to, well, what's happening to the hotel, bearing in mind you don't live in Zurich, is not overly intelligent. And for many passengers, they don't even discover that until they arrive in Zurich. Now, interestingly enough, when we take the people side, we start engaging with the Lufthansa team, particularly as a frequent flyer, in the lounges or with the frequent flyer staff, and the staff said, it's a pretty dumb system, isn't it? Yeah, you're right. Well, which should we do? Should we just simply reroute you via Brussels and get you there tonight? Or should we reroute you through Zurich and we'll organize the hotel? So smart people will always get around a dumb process. But their IT people would tell you that was intelligent automation because it was making their life so much easier for rebooking, but not through the eyes of the customer. And interestingly enough, many of you will have seen that in the days when we could fly, that the frequent flyers or the most expensive flyers can get around the system. They can talk to those staff that can solve them. But interestingly enough, would someone ever become a frequent flyer if their first experiences were being dumped in a third country that they weren't expecting, or they weren't able to speak to someone? So think about the whole thing through the eyes of the customer. So customer excellence means raising the bar. A couple of different ways. So if we just look at it in terms of the classic stuff, we've gone from customer support, we've gone through customer success, we're now into the paradigm of saying, well, gee, it's all about customer experience. But actually very few organizations that are talking about customer experience, in my opinion, are delivering on customer experience. Because what they're really doing is actually interpreting customer experience is, how do I optimize the sales funnel? How do I get you to spend your money quicker? And customer experience, well, it's all making it easy to take the money, as opposed to making it easy to deliver consistent experience. So customer excellence takes a slightly different tack and is combining customer experience and operational excellence, because customer success or customer excellence is really about delivering amazing service every time through every touch point, however the customer chooses to engage with you. And it's that consistency that's so often the problem. Because if you talk to some of the Forrester guys, they will tell you that they too find it incredible that the customer experience teams are separate and divorced from the operational excellence teams. Well, it's the connectivity between the two that actually makes the difference. And without dropping names of those that are always being dropped, think about it for a moment. Think about those high-profile, tech-oriented, online marketplace-oriented companies. Do they separate the experience or the operational excellence? Or do they deliver great experiences because they're operationally excellent? And so the things go together. So as we go through today, obviously we don't have lots of time, but I'm going to be sharing a whole bunch of graphics. If you're interested in using them in whatever ways for your own purposes, then just reach out, get in touch, and I'm happy to share some of these with you. So another way that I want you to look and think about whether the automation projects that you're working on are really making the difference is with this one, what I call the zones of customer excellence. So, is it poor service? Is it just the expected service? Are you delivering great service? And when it comes to my doing business with you, is it just difficult? Yeah, expectedly difficult, or wow, there's no pain at all. Amazing service. And getting people up into what I call the zone of advocacy. And I'd just like you to think about, and by the way, for this one, this also applies to any vendors that are watching. Think about our customers. How many of our customers, if we're lucky, are existing right in the center in that zone of tolerance? Yeah, they're a tech company. I expected the software to be full of bugs and they didn't disappoint. It's full of bugs. Well, it's not as easy as it could be, but I can make it do what I want. So actually, I'm going to put the product in the zone of tolerance. Is it a case of saying, and for me, this is my experience of retail banking, is, hey, you know what? The service is poor, and there is pain. It's not necessarily real pain, but there's some pain, and it's the zone of transaction. Don't bother trying to build a relationship with me, Mr. Bank, Mrs. Bank. Don't bother contacting me to sell other products. This is a zone of transaction. I've got an account. I put my money in. I take my money out. Now leave me alone. Actually, don't want to engage with your organization at all. I just want to use what I need to use. If I contrast that, and forgive me for anyone that's heard me tell the story before, with a coffee chain. Well, it's principally here in the UK, but I know they're in a few places in the US now, called Pret a Manger, where they give incredible service. And my definition of no pain and great service, you're going to say, well, it's a coffee shop. How do you think? Well, sometimes the coffee is too strong, or maybe not as hot as I want, or maybe they just don't make it well. And you simply walk up and say, excuse me, boom, it's gone. They make the next one. Nothing is too much trouble for them to actually get it right. As another example, and this was one that came up last week in the conversation, way back in the early 90s, because I'm too old and grey, assuming that the hair's left is grey. I worked selling some services, and I was selling some services or trying to an organization I hadn't sold to before. And eventually I managed to make a small sale. And I was really pleased. And that led to a second small sale. But with the second small sale, there was a bit of a problem. Something went wrong in the delivery. And so the customer called me, said, look, I don't really know how to handle this situation. I know that, we've got a month's notice on this situation, but, it's really not going to work out. And I said, well, okay, well, I can be with you in 2.5 hours. I got in my car, I drove to this client, and I resolved the situation such that they didn't have to wait a month. They were actually able to resolve it that day at zero cost to them. 4 weeks later, the guy called me and they required some more product or services, and we delivered them. While there, they gave us a sole supply agreement. And they gave us a sole supply agreement saying, well, it isn't until something goes wrong and we see how things being handled go wrong and how quickly it's put right that we realize that, wow, there is a difference between organizations. Oh, and by the way, I've also had a word with a number of my colleagues in other places around the country and suggested that they should do business with you as well. How would that be? The zone of advocacy, that's really where we want people. So customer excellence is that combination of customer experience with operational excellence. It's there to not just delight, but amaze customers. And it's when we link it together. And if we can use automation as a part of that, great. But we shouldn't be automating for the sake of it and never forget that people are an important piece of that jigsaw. And we're going to come back to that. So building on those, what we started to put together was something which I call the customer excellence framework. And so I suspect that most of you on the session here today won't have seen this. So this is a framework for excellence when it comes to delivering, how do I deliver those customers? And we can see we have 5 elements: persona, journey, process, technology, and people. And we need all of the 5 elements working together in harmony if we want to deliver true success. And then we have a life cycle. So we go through discovery, analysis, design, validation, implement, etc. If we're not looking at the technology in the context of, well, hang on, who's it for? What's the journeys they're going through? What are the processes that we have in place or need to have in place? And now, what is the technology that we need to support those processes and enable our people? Then we're missing whole great chunks. So let me just take a couple of minutes and give you a little more insight into that. So when we're looking at personas, we're looking at stylized groups of people. So yes, customers is the obvious one, but my caution to you is never be afraid to use the other variants. So users, citizens, patients. Don't make the mistake of just using the word customer. So when I'm talking about customer in the context of this presentation, I'm meaning the people outside of your organization who keep your organization in existence primarily through spending their money with you, but it could also be by voting for you from a political or governmental point of view. If people are inside your organization, they are not customers. They can be colleagues, they can be users. And we see this a lot in the agile world where suddenly we talk about, oh, well, I'm working for customers. Well, no, actually you're not. You're working for people inside. These are colleagues and they're users. So these are often user journeys, which leads us into the second column, which is taking that journey-centric view. So often when we talk about customer journeys, people are only looking actually at buying journeys. Well, what about the service journey, issue to resolution? What about when we're looking at staffing? We talk about an onboarding journey for an employee, but what about the leaving journey? And then, of course, we can also have other types of journeys, whether they're system journeys or user journeys. And yes, you could say, well, actually, there's no real difference between a user and a customer journey. They're really the same thing. They are, but they're coming from a totally different perspective. When you look at a customer journey, then often many of the steps in your customer journey occur outside of your organization. You know, I look someone up on the internet, or I look them up on the Yellow Pages, or I'm walking down the high street. These aren't part of your process. They are, however, as to the third column, the connected processes. They're the processes that deliver those experiences or are triggered by those customer actions. So we need to have that separation. Now, whether we look at them through the lens of value chains, whether we think about them as operational processes or management processes, or indeed decisions and rules, because the fascinating thing that I've found over the years is so much process simplification can take place without a great deal of analysis. Simply looking at who the customers or users are, looking at the journeys they're going through, and questioning the decisions and rules often results in amazing degrees of simplification. And actually, a lot of the systems that we might be building, we don't even need to build, because actually there was either outmoded, outdated, or irrelevant decisions and rules taking place. And great swathes of cost can fall out of things. Once we have that understanding, now we can look and ask ourselves the question that says, well, what technologies are available? What do we have? What do we need in order to deliver, enable, support, or manage those experiences? And what are we doing to monitor and manage them? And then finally, gee, what does it mean for our organization, for our people? Are we rewarding them the right way? You know, one of the things that I always found fascinating over the years is the number of times that people will say to me, Mark, I don't understand it. I can't get these guys working. They won't work as a team. You know, I've got my OPEX people and my CX people, my IT people. They're just not playing nicely together. And nothing I do seems to get them working together in harmony. And I usually ask the same question: how are they rewarded? Is there a collective reward system that says if the three things aren't working in harmony, then nobody picks up the bonus, the raise, the promotion, whatever it is? And the answer usually comes back as, well, no, they're all rewarded separately. Well, therein lies the answer. Behavior follows reward. If I'm rewarded for building an IT system, regardless of whether it's fit for purpose, why do I worry about the purpose? If I'm rewarded for delivering something on customer experience, why do I care whether it's operationally efficient? Conversely, if efficiency is what I'm rewarded on, no one's getting me to connect those things together. The customer excellence winners are those that bring those things together and bring the rewards together and set common goals. Because if you set common goals and you set common reward structures, then most of the other noise, or much of the other noise that we all deal with, just goes away. And actually, we don't have a problem to fix. It's one of those strange things about change management. If we get out of the way, often it'll sort itself out. So the 8 stages that I showed look linear, but actually there's a couple of things there. One, they loop round. So you go from the improvement back round to discover. So it's a continuum, but also you'll looping backwards as you go forward, because you start to validate something and you realize that some of the assumptions aren't quite working. So you might need to go back to design analysis, etc. But the main thing to remember is that this is not prescriptive in saying how you should do design or how you should analyze. There's all sorts of different tools and techniques that each of you can use. But if you're not following this life cycle, then you are missing a real trick, because I'm going to make a pretty arrogant statement that this life cycle is the most effective change life cycle you will ever come across. And I wrote about this in the People-Centric Process Management book with Ian Gotts. This life cycle is based on human change through neurolinguistic programming, and was based on some interviews that I was doing with Richard Bandler many, many years ago. And if we think about it, neurolinguistic programming, whether it's directly from Grinder and Bandler, whether it's from the likes of Paul McKenna, or any one of the other thousands of life coaches that there appear to be around the globe now, are all based on those teachings. So this life cycle has actually successfully transformed the lives of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. So for anyone that looks upon it and thinks, well, I'm not so sure about that, I think I know a better one, I just throw out there that says, if someone can share with me that's had such a deep level of personal impact, then I'd be interested to learn and see more. So what the framework isn't, is it's not an absolute method. It's not prescriptive. It's not aimed at replacing things like Lean, Six Sigma, TQM, etc. It's a thinking framework to combine with other methods and tools. It's a guide to help frame your mindset and, to be honest, to understanding why we've been successful or why we might have been less successful in some of our projects along the way. Because we can look at it and ask, well, okay, which of those things didn't we do? Did we miss one of the 5 elements? Did we ignore a stage in this life cycle? And usually, by the way, the one that's ignored is the validation phase. If we put the effort into analysis, discovery, analysis, and design, then we think, great, we've done all that. Now we're going to rush off and implement it. It's amazing how many people don't go back and say, before we build it, I just want to check in with you. This was what you said the problem was. This is where we found the causes. This is what we think we're going to put in place to solve it. Are you sure that's what you want us to do? Do you want us to proceed? Has anything changed, etc., etc.? If I had to pick one key stage of that, then that's the one that will save you a lot of heartache. The other piece of it is it's a communication vehicle by which all parts of your organization can help make sure that you're on the same page. Okay, so taking a little look at tooling. Now, some of you have seen me use the next couple of slides before, and I've used them in different ways, and I'm going to use them slightly differently today. So over the next 3 days, as you listen and you talk about RPA and you talk about intelligent automation, as I've been talking about, so, well, hang on, it doesn't exist as an island. So ask yourself the question, how well have you discovered the processes, or how well have you mined the journeys or the processes? Have you simulated what the real impacts are? And, and there's all sorts of things that you will learn and need to think about. So for example, if I take process mining as a technology, how many of the vendors actually combine full simulation with the process mining? The answer is actually not many, unless they're linking it with modeling. So if they've got modeling and mining interconnected, by that, I'm meaning things like BPMN style modeling, etc., then we can start to do broad-based simulation. We can simulate resource, we can simulate better timing, we can test our theories, which is different from some of the simulation that says, well, okay, on a predictive simulation, I can predict that if these things have happened based on history, this is what's going to happen in the future. So standalone process mining can do a lot in terms of that predictive behavior, but it doesn't necessarily help you simulate new behaviors, new resources. And if I give you a specific pointer, then one of the areas that I frequently come across is, if we think about a discrete event style simulation, think about calendaring. Assuming that we're not all having to work from home, your building is potentially available 24/7. Your staff may only be available 9 till 5. Other equipment may be available at different. So a calendar needs to be specific to the resources. And often when I see people working on process simulation, they say, hey, I've got an average on an average on an average. Well, that's a less than average result. So you need to be looking at each of these pieces and thinking about, is it the ideal? Now, how hard you need to work on it and how deep you need to go is going to depend on the desired outcome and the size of the problem. Simple problems don't justify lots of stuff, but hey, some of this stuff can be done pretty simply, pretty quickly at a lightweight level. So, you know, on the right-hand side, a lot of that focus has been around using RPA and intelligent automation, ERP, whatever the systems, to build the systems. Now, whether we start from the left by understanding the processes that we need, whether we're going to capture them through mapping, whether we're then going to model behaviors, ideal states, etc., and then we're going to go and build them, then running monitoring, management, etc., or whether you want to start from the systems and do system process discovery, because remember, with process mining, we're only discovering what's going on in the system. We're not discovering the whole process. We can get nearer to large parts of the process through task mining than we can process mining, but it still doesn't account for totally manual situations. So think about, when we're looking at that automation piece, have you got the other pieces in place? Whether they're, you know, heavyweight or whether they're lightweight, you're going to need all of those things together if you want to be delivering consistent, great long-term value for your customers and for your own organization. And then just to finish up, and this is why I was smiling with Jose's introduction, and I think, you know, as I say, we didn't rehearse this, but he knows I'm passionate about this. I can't leave the session today without reminding you that it's people, not systems, that define and deliver most customer experiences. And you need to work hard to make sure that you get everyone on the same page. So whether you're thinking about your marketing, design thinkers, or external agencies, what's the operations impact of the customer experience? What can we realistically implement and roll out? How does the ideal roadmap look like? You know, from the process professionals, line of business managers, how do the processes, KPIs, and decisions impact? How should process improvement initiatives take place? How do we get everyone excited for change? And then, most importantly, everyone in the organization needs to know how what they do contributes to the success of our customers, to delivering those experiences. They need to have that ability to work out how and what they can do to improve the customer experience. And they may need to understand why we need to change those processes. You know, and really good examples here of, think about it, travel and banking related. Bank managers no longer have the ability to make a lot of those loan decisions they used to, because someone decided the system makes a better decision, which reduces the experience for the customer. Once upon a time, it was really easy for the desk personnel in hotels to comp this or change that and make instant changes. And then suddenly at some stage, the authority was taken away. I've got to go and get a manager, or the system says I can only do this. The systems that we put in place, technically or non-technically, often actually reduce the customer experience and reduce the involvement of people because they don't care. So ignore people at your peril. So I thought this was an interesting statistic when I saw it a while ago from GuideSpark. 1.3 trillion into transformation initiatives, 900 billion being wasted on failed programs. And the biggest failure that was identified was not effectively communicating goals, strategy, and purpose with the employees. It's incredible, isn't it? 900 billion. And I wonder how many 100 billion of that was on building systems that didn't actually make a difference. So finally, another way of looking at excellence is excellence equals everyone engaged. As I say, does everyone know who the customers are? Does everyone know what success is for the customers? A little frightening maybe, and it's just as well that we're in a virtual world, but I can be pretty sure that if I opened this up and posed the questions to some of the vendors that are presenting over this week and actually ask them what is success for the customer through the eyes of the customer, some of them may not actually be able to tell us. They can tell me the problems they could solve, would solve, should solve, what other people have done and how great the technology is, but they don't necessarily know what success looks like for the customer. Do we know how what we do impacts customer success? How do we make sure that we keep communicating effectively? And is everyone's business success judged by excellence? Because I can tell you from your customer's point of view, excellence is expected every day, every time, by everyone. And therefore you need to make sure that everyone is empowered to deliver it. Use the automation, but never forget that it's still going to be a people business. At least I hope it is. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and bring Jose back in.
Outstanding, Mark. Always a masterclass on whatever topic you focus on, because you have the depth and the breadth of experience as a practitioner and leader in this field. So the first question that came up is actually a general question, not so much about your session, but the overall sessions. Pedro Cunha is asking, are we having access to this excellent presentation? So Pedro, here are the good news. You're going to have access to all of these presentations, because we're, as one of the nearly 3,000 registered participants for this conference, we will send to you all sometime the next week or two an email. They'll have a link and password for all of the recordings of each one of the sessions. So a great benefit of being a registered participant in the conference. And excellent presentation, Mark. Thank you so much for that. We only have a couple of minutes here, and this was truly a masterclass from beginning to end on customer excellence and in the context of technology, process, and people, like you said. I have a challenging question for you, which is that you've laid out the case for customer excellence. How do you build innovation on top of this? Because some will say, you cannot do that by just listening to your customers or even understanding the customer journey, which is a bit controversial. So I'm curious about, how do you build innovation on this customer excellence?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great one, Jose. And I think it goes back to what I was saying, is that, when I talk about identifying the personas and the journeys, I didn't say they had to be your existing customers. So they are the customers that you would like. So I've identified that there's this group of people who I would love to be my customers. And I've identified that these are the journeys that they go through. And now I've worked out that this is where I can intersect or interject myself, either in their journeys, or another way that we don't have time for today, or I can now see who else is already on their journey, that I should now be part of that ecosystem. Because, hey, you know what? And think about it as the moving company. The removal company says, whoa, hang on a minute. If I inject myself with the estate agent and do the storage at the point they want to stage and sell the house, I automatically am now going to win the business when they come to move home. So I can use that customer and journey understanding to create innovative products. You're absolutely right, Jose, and I think banking is perhaps the best example, that if you just focus on your current customers and the products and services that you've always done, then you're probably going to miss the opportunity to introduce innovation.
Well said. Well said. I was actually going back to my notes here, and because some of the themes of the questions that were posed by the audience, and I want to ask this one a little over time, but I still want to build this one in. That you built customer excellence as really the kind of the pinnacle. You have, building on customer support to customer success to customer experience with lot being talked about that these days, to then building that, you know, top level of customer excellence. The question is, from almost an economic Darwinism standpoint, you would expect that more organizations had come to this conclusion that were acting on it. What's going on? Why do you think so few organizations have done a good job at customer excellence? Do you think it's a lack of understanding, vision? There are other reasons. What's the barriers that organizations are having to get to that level?
So I think it's twofold. So one, if we look at it from, you know, many of the audiences that we both speak to in terms of the operational excellence stuff, often that's still very inward looking, focused on efficiency, and either have not been able or been prevented from understanding who the customer is. Hey, that's not your job, get away from that. So that's kept them down. And then on the other side, when we look at the support success, then we get the big language syndrome. Well, where actually we've got to rejuvenate our customer success. I know, we'll call it customer experience, or I guarantee you, or you can guarantee me, that if we have this conversation in 2 years' time or 3 years, someone at the conference is going to present their success story on customer excellence. And I'm sorry, but you and I are going to be scratching our head because there was nothing about them changing the underlying operational processes. It just became the new word for customer experience because the old word got tired. And I think, you know, that's my frustration. And, you know, we've both been around for a long, long time now, and it's really frustrating how the same stuff is just being given bigger. Intelligent automation, sorry guys, you're all here. Wasn't automation always to a degree intelligent? Hyper automation, you know, we keep using a bigger and bigger buzzword. It's still fundamentally the same thing. And I think that's the frustrating part.
Well said. And I have to mention that, you know, and it gets distorted over time too, right, Mark? Because, you know, I cannot tell you how many people I'm supporting these days that they're talking about artificial intelligence. And when I look at what they're doing, it's nothing more than multivariate regression analysis that has been around for decades. There's nothing cognitive about what they're doing, but they're calling it AI. But it's great to have you with us, Mark. It's a masterclass on customer excellence. Thank you for that. We are all better off by listening to someone who does it consistently and has done it consistently for several for a few decades now, not to talk too much about how long you've been around. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a big virtual applause to Mark McGregor, and from Birmingham in UK to our global audience. Thank you so much for your expertise and insights, Mark. I have the duty of following up on the shoes of greatness by sharing with you at the top of the hour how great enduring organizations and leaders scale technology, leadership, and value in their organizations in these times of rapid change and extreme uncertainty. We're going to look at the benchmark of great enduring organizations and leaders. We're going to look at the components of their extraordinary performance and try to learn from them and how we can apply those concepts in our organization. Is it about ideas? Is it about methods? Is it about technologies? Is it about people? So which components drives the performance of great enduring organizations? A very small slice on the distribution curve of performance, the ones at the very end, the top end of the distribution. Is it about ideas, methods, technologies, or people? Keep that question in mind. I'm going to ask you that question again. I'll see you all at the top of the hour when we're going to accelerate excellence and innovation together. Thank you.